First of all, if you can tell us a little about your book.
Okay, the book, the title itself says what the book is about: Assam, the Accord and the Discord, which means that the base of the book is, of course, the Assam Accord, and we all thought that it would bring peace to the state, but it didn't bring, and instead it brought a slew of discord, and a lot of issues. What we have seen now is the issue is still on, and nobody has found any closure or a solution to it yet. So that's a broad canvas. But what I have, I have actually gone. Say, if you look at the chronological part of it, that means I have looked at from the rule of the Burmese. I mean, just at the very end of the Burmese rule, to the of course the British entry, fall of the Ahom kingdom, and then the colonial rule, and a lot of migration that had happened, which is a question of language came in, question of land came in. So I brought all of that, and then of course the post-independent Assam and how this entire issue is played on, and then till date. And also what I've included is possible solutions what people are talking about, say work permits or constitutional protection under Clause 6 of the Accord. So these issues I have brought in, and the other thing is I also tried to see things like what were the triggers actually for the present migration. Okay, we don't even talk about various things like, say, the failure of the jute crop. Everybody talks about the failure of indigo, but people don't talk about, we in Assam, we don't talk about the failure of jute leading to actually a bout of migration, say to Gwalpara and the other areas we were bordering Manasi and Rangpur. So that is what I looked at, and certain other things like, say, the Bengal famine, okay, during the Second World War, because the rice, the crop failed that year. And ideally, British would have been able to import rice from Burma, but because the Japanese had taken over Burma, so they panicked, and they closed all water routes and the other routes. So there was, and whatever rice was available was going to the army kitchen. So that led to a famine in Bengal, which was like both West and East Bengal, and people from the villages started migrating to Dhaka and to Calcutta, but a lot of people came to Assam also. And when you look at this is not, I'm just not saying just because it may have happened, but what I'm looking at is also the biggest indicator of it is that though there was a Muslim League government in Bengal and in Assam, but and that's the reason we all talk about how they were trying to bring in only the Muslims. But they were Hindus, they were also part of that migration. So that means everybody was affected by it. So, and the government tried to give some sort of safe escape to this lot of people. So these are various small things in the sense that I have tried to put in all of that. But these are people may look at it as a very small thing. But these are also things that not talked about when we talk about the Assam issue. So that's why I've tried to see the whole entire issue from a wider perspective. And that's the reason I brought in the issue of partition, the effect of partition, the effect of emergency, the effect of Bangladesh war in Assam politics. No, it was finding ready documents was very difficult, because mostly many things, particularly during what happened during Assam agitation, is there in people's lips, many the older generation. But when it comes to books, we have very few. Okay, so a lot of people, when you talk in a drawing room conversation, people will tell you a lot of things. And the other thing is the Nehru Memorial Library, the collection that we have, the books and the other pamphlets and various other memorandums, both in English and Assamese. The availability, the range is quite a bit in the Nehru Memorial Library. So I spent a lot of time in the library, found a lot of information. information, and I must thank the chief librarian of NMML, because what happens is like she had to make an extra effort. Why? Because not too many people take interest in Assam, in Delhi. So all the books are kept in the storeroom. See, a lot of things actually, which I particularly when I started looking at from the emergency point of view, even top intellectuals of Assam or who write in Assam told me this is something new. Because they always believed that there was no effect of emergency in Assam. I tried to look at why, and I also looked at why not. I questioned that contention that emergency had no effect on Assam. So I've questioned that, and I've also called that Assam agitation is in a way offshoot of the post-emergency politics of Assam. So that is something. And the other tidbits that you'll find very interesting things, like a lot of people say about how the AGP government, the first AGP government, it just felt, the President came in just a month before the elections were to be held. But the AGP ministers, Biraj Sharma went to Delhi and tried to convince, the government, the present then government, to hold elections but not bring President's rule. And but Debilal agreed to it. But then, by then the government fell, and Chandrasekhar government came, and it was supported by the Congress, the Rajiv Gandhi government. So they put so much pressure on Chandrasekhar government that there was no way out. So I asked Prafula Banta, so I said, could you not have met Chandrasekhar? And he said, when I went to meet him, Chandrasekhar was himself convinced that there should be President's rule. No, I also tried to explain how 1983 elections, how Indira Gandhi went for it, and that led to so much of killings. And she herself actually tried to, duck questions from international media and national media about the number of deaths. And she said, you guys are exaggerating, not so many people have died in NL. And then the BSF chief at that time happened to be my uncle, and he is no more, but he told me, he said, and KP's Gill also told me this, and that overnight, just before Indira Gandhi was to come, because many bodies were dumped into a pond and covered. So, and then the stink was there the next day. So things like that. My aunt, who was the wife of that top officer, the BSF officer, so she told me about how she went to volunteer in Delhi and what she saw. So these are some things that I have tried to bring in. And I also have said that how political, a lot of political maneuverings happened that led to killing, say, in Gokul. I actually quote from former IPS officer E. Ram Mohan's book about what he was the officer here, and he spoke about how that killing was organized by the ruling party. So those things I have brought in, and I hope that somebody will take it forward from here, or do some more research, or because our thing is journalistic, so whatever I came across, whatever I've written. But I just hope that there will be some academic study to it, particularly about my causes of migration. We always blame only the Muslim League for it. They said this was their part of their Pakistan thing. But that was a part of it. But then there were so many other things to it, which is missing from, I feel that missing from our academic interest and academic research. I haven't taken the name of the person, but I was told by the former Chief Minister, Tarun Roy, that how ad hoc the whole system was at the detention centers, that why they had to suddenly think of it. There was a Guwahati High Court order, and because people were disappearing, and they said that something needs to be done. So the government of the day was thinking what to do about it. So there was this minister whom I was told that from the Mia community, and he happened to visit UK and as part of an official delegation, where he saw a similar arrangement in the UK for people who were foreigners or suspected to be so without papers. So that he suggested in the meeting, and that was adopted, and that is how the first Goalpara Detention Center came up. So what this indicates is that the entire process was so ad hoc. So that is what I also question, in the sense that border control is Government of India's responsibility, it's not the state government's responsibility. So then why was all this allowed, or why was all this, why the state government was pushed to take these decisions? So somewhere I feel that this also needs to be questioned. Yes, what I found that very interesting, because Atul Bora, who actually drew the flag, he gave me a copy of his original drawing, and he told me that, I met two people from Mukti Bahini at the time. They were in Guwahati, and we met, and at that time there was a lot of interest in Mukti Bahini. So, and they were all over. The president last year came to visit India, and he went and visited Balat in Meghalaya, which is in Meghalaya now. At that time it was in Assam, and he said he set up a camp there. He's now the president of Bangladesh. So, and our Assam police former police officer Hirenna Bhatta has been given award by the Sheikh Hasina government for training Mukti Bahini. So there was a lot of these engagement had happened in Assam. So he said he met these Mukti Bahini volunteers, and while leaving they gave him a flag. And when he saw the flag, and they explained to him what these colors are for. So he found the color red to be very interesting. And when he was drawing the flag for us, he took inspiration from it. He said this on record to me. But interestingly, after a couple of years, this same flag was used to go off. My former editor, Siddharth Varadarajan, he called me when he thought of starting this new digital web-based news magazine and news site. So he said, why don't you come? So I wanted to cover the Northeast. So he said, yes, done. So that's how I joined him from day one, when we didn't even have an office. And now I feel good that it's a big community of journalists working there and trying to do journalism. So at a time when journalism is not very easy nowadays, and you have to and also not very easy because to question the government of the day. Questioning the government of the day has always been difficult for journalists. But so it is continued now. So I feel good that I get an opportunity to question the government or its policy, or also talk about to mainstream Indian readers what is about my vision, about my state, my vision. And many times I feel that a lot of these interesting stories, they never get space. And earlier also in other papers and all, people would say that there's no space. But now in the digital era, you can't say that there's no space. So digital era, I feel, has really, these websites have really helped us Northeast to get a lot of attention from mainstream India attention. So that's what I feel, that the rise of the digital sites is a boon for the Northeast.
Okay. Last one. Do you think that questioning the government has become more difficult now?
Yes, it is. It has become difficult, because another thing is, another tool that I see that a lot of journalists have been using was RTI. And now you see how the RTI thing has been diluted. So all governments have been difficult. But when you take away things like, say, RTI, when you are under surveillance, when you go into a particular ministry, and the person who would talk to you would be always looking over their shoulders, whether to say things or not, even official things. And earlier we used to do certain things as sources, because where does a journalist, loyalty lies? Journalist loyalty lies with the people. You have to bring stories to people. So, and people are not fools. If you say something which is biased or something, people can see it. So my job as a journalist is always to not take sides but bring the story. Okay, and so even that has become a bit difficult now.